In 1968, the notorious Hays Code was lifted after losing authority over the years. But before the Hays Code was completely nullified, it can be seen that foreign markets had created their own unique look for the monster that did not succumb to the guidelines of the Hays Code. The British production company Hammer Films became interested in making their own version of the monster in 1958. This version of the monster, played by Christopher Lee, was a grimier variation, with more cuts, scars, and peeling skin to emphasize the zombie-like nature of the monster. Further, unlike the Boris Karloff version, whose eyes are very expressive and give depth to the character, Christopher Lee's variation has significant cataracts and a very dead stare that emphasizes the non-human traits of the monster. This film marked a turning point in Hammer film history, as it became the first to truly use the Hammer staple of gratuitous Technicolor blood, the Hammer film of horror. Because this variation was allowed to emphasize blood and gratuitous violence more than films during the Hays Code, we see far more violence due to this, and therefore a much grimier and disturbing creature. Aside from foreign markets, many new genres and styles of film were being implemented, especially with the rise of the drive-in theaters that catered to younger crowds, with a thirst for unique films that pushed boundaries. Due to this, many new genres of films and exploitation pictures utilized the image of Frankenstein in far more daring ways that contrasted the Hays Code norms, and looked at the monster from a unique perspective. To quote Stuart Fishkoff, the slow burn horror of the Universal era was replaced by the collapse of the old Hays or Motion Pictures Code in the 1960s, which issued itself to license, to shock, titillate, and nauseate. This was coupled with advances in the technology, or special effects, that assured that the old tradition of almost sanitary, often unseen horror and gradual enveloping suspense was traded in for a new tradition of horror, one of shock and blood-drenched gore, all to the delight of this bulging youth market. An example of this comes from the I Was a Teenage Frankenstein movie. This was a part of a group of teen-focused horror films. While this was slightly before producers truly took advantage of the demand for gore effects, it did push boundaries, including a far more gruesome monster, and body parts being fed to an alligator. This specific Frankenstein was played by a much younger actor, with a much more gruesome appearance. Oddly enough, the face is the only gruesome portion, as the rest of the monster's body is quite normal. Nonetheless, the gruesomeness reflects the grimy nature of this type of exploitation film, and the raw violence that was advertised. Another quote from Stuart Fishoff. The use of the monster demonstrates here the monsters were not the other, but us, possibly in all our adolescent hormonal rage and confusion. The monster is seen more fearful and confused throughout the film, exuding innocence as well as fear. In this way, the film saw the monster in more of the humanist view that the frontispiece and Presumption took. Other genres that were becoming increasingly popular in the United States included the kaiju movie, a Japanese-originated genre of giant monster movies. Here, we got the film Frankenstein Conquers the World, where the monster is as tall as a skyscraper and gets into scrapes with a giant lizard. Or the blaxploitation genre, which catered to black culture of the 70s, including grievances of the time and critiques of police brutality, Vietnam War, and daily struggles of African Americans during the time. The Frankenstein character was reminiscent of the original Frankenstein look, with a flat head and large forehead, the main differences being the monster was now black instead of green, and had a slight fro haircut. For this exploitation crowd, Frankenstein Created Women was made, or for the Western crowd, we had Jesse James meets Frankenstein's daughter. Depending on the specific genre they were catering to, the monster can be seen as either the hero, such as in Frankenstein Conquers the World, or a villain, as in Blackenstein. But nonetheless, the creators focused the monster to ascribe to what the audiences wanted and expected from the genre. Now let's look at some family and comedic interpretations of the monster. Films such as Young Frankenstein, Monster Squad, Frankenstein the College Years, Alvin the Chipmunk Meet Frankenstein, and Rock and Roll Frankenstein, the horror's multiple appearances in Scooby-Doo and the show's subsequent reiterations, demonstrate unique perspective. These variations, here the monster is usually a misunderstood creature that just needs guidance to become an exceptional member of the society he is trying to be a part of. The monster almost always resembles the universal interpretation, with the only variations being the result of adapting the character to the story. Pop culture recognizes the universal interpretation as the base model for the monster, as it is the most recognizable. Therefore, when parodying or criticizing the source material, they use a common monster image so that all the traits, lore, and expectations from the monster are pre-packaged for the audience. There is less needing to re-establish the character, as society has done this for us already. Further, these expectations allow for ease of comedy through juxtaposition. For example, in Frankenstein the College Years, the comedy comes from the subverting of expectations when the monster, when notorious for fear and violence, finds that it fits in the college community. It makes a football team and becomes a local celebrity due to his simple-minded nature, extra strength, and ability to party. This juxtaposition emphasizes the comedic aspects while placing a well-known character in a new atmosphere that the creature might actually thrive in modern times. Any fear of the monster is humiliated by putting the monster in these surreal and ridiculous situations. When children see the scary monster in Alvin the Chipmunks Meet Frankenstein, the kids who may have preconceived fears towards this giant creature may laugh when it turns out to be a thick-skulled creature searching for love and acceptance. Further, they are taught a lesson about acceptance and not judging those who may seem different. In other words, the comedic variations of the monster almost always subscribe to the Boris Karloff version, as it makes this comedy and story much easier to tell, as setting up the character as fearful has already been done. But important lessons for the kids to learn are presented through the themes of humanity that are given in Mary Shelley's book. Finally, we will look at modern interpretations of the monster. I will start this era with the 1990 film Frankenstein Unbound, directed by Roger Corman. While the film shares many similarities to the genre and exploitation films that preceded it, for example, a time-traveling plot and meta-nature of Mary Shelley playing a supporting character, the story takes the monster character far more seriously than the aforementioned genre films. Like the humanist variation, this monster is seen as more of a tragic character, whose evil doings are a product of societal biases and fear. Another example of this type of interpretation comes from the 1994 Kenneth Branagh film Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which plays as the closest adaptation to Mary Shelley's book, although it does stray in more than a few ways. In this version, the monster is played by veteran actor Robert De Niro. By casting such a well-known actor, perhaps we see the monster as more like us, and less monstrous like in the Edison film. Other modern interpretations of the monster include Van Helsing, Frankenstein Theory, I, Frankenstein, and Victor Frankenstein. Aside from Van Helsing, which interprets the character in a far more cartoonish sense, these monsters look more human than the other variations. Scars are introduced, again, to demonstrate the monster's origins as individual human parts. The skin is much more of a natural color, unlike the green disintegrating look of the Boris Karloff or Christopher Lee variations. Some movies, like I, Frankenstein, try to almost sexualize the monster and make it appeal to the young adult crowd. Here, in I, Frankenstein, not only is the monster played by a veteran actor, but an attractive, fit, and moody monster akin to youth culture desires. Still, the attempt to make the monster look more recognizably human, though often an imperfect human, demonstrates the humanity of the monster while maintaining what made it ostracized from society and the danger it still carries. The far more serious tone caters to this idea, as the horror comes from a reflection of society and how we react to the realistically abnormal, rather than blatant fear-inducing images and gore effects. In conclusion, the Frankenstein monster has gone through countless iterations throughout cinematic history. Due to the character's ambiguity in the novel, many have interpreted the creature in unique lights. Whether the creature is a pure villain from the 1910 Edison film, a tragic character from the 1931 James Whale film, or a hero from the I, Frankenstein films, the monster has been seen in countless different lights based off of the perspective of the filmmakers. The monster has shown more versatility than any other classic horror film monster. Now, we must only wait and see what the new generation of filmmakers will do with the Frankenstein monster. For a slightly longer analysis, which is also a transcript for this essay, please click on the link below. Thank you.